Good day, everyone. Today, we will try to discover the Climate Change Act of 2009, Republic Act number 9729, as amended by Republic Act number 10174. According to a report issued in 2019 by the Institute for Economics and Peace, the Philippines is the country most vulnerable to climate change. Aside from recurring typhoons and increase in precipitation in some areas, sea level rise is a major threat to marine ecosystems and to coastal human populations and their livelihoods. Climate change did not only exacerbate socio-economic and environmental problems, but it also threatens the country's rich cultural heritage, as well as some of the rarest and most diverse fragile ecosystems in the world. Greenhouse gases contributes to climate change. Concentration of these gases in the atmosphere accumulate. Global temperature increases, producing consequences of climate change and global warming across the world. Global warming is when these greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and other air pollutants collect in the atmosphere and absorb sunlight and solar radiation, bouncing off the Earth's surface. Philippines is a minor emitter of greenhouse gases, but it is among the most vulnerable to climate change impacts, just like Ondoy in 2009, Yolanda in 2013 are just few of its examples. How did the Philippines respond? How did the Philippines address climate change?
The Philippines has taken the lead in the global campaign to mitigate disaster risk brought about by global warming. The country's laws on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction have excellent legal frameworks and are said to be the best in the world. Relevantly, one's right to a balanced and healthful ecology and the right to health are mandated as state policies by the Constitution itself. A catena of laws reflective of the said constitutional edict is enforced in the country. To name a few, the revised Forestry Code regulates the utilization and disposition of forest resources to the end that public welfare is promoted. The Mining Act aims to promote the rational exploration, utilization, and conservation of mineral resources. The Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, which streamlines the procedures for the prevention, control, and abatement of pollution of the country's air quality and water resources. The Climate Change Act, which establishes a Climate Change Commission tasked to coordinate action plans of the government relating to climate change. And lastly, the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, which institutionalizes measures for reducing disaster risk and enhancement disaster preparedness and response capabilities. The policy legal framework is thus already in place. However, the present challenge is to translate national policies, plans, and programs into local community action to save lives and reduce disaster risk and economic losses. In fact, in the 2015 Paris Agreement, which is a landmark agreement in the history of humankind, the Philippines, as chair for the Climate Vulnerable Forum, led the call to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Bending the global warming curve to such degree is a moral imperative because it means saving the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. It means upholding the human rights of the poor and vulnerable. It means ensuring the integrity of our ecosystems.
Definition of terms. Here are the commonly used terms in climate change. Climate change refers to a change in climate that can be identified by changes in the mean and or variability of its properties and that persists for an extended period, typically decades or longer, whether due to natural variability or as a result of human activity. Climate risk refers to the product of climate and the related hazards working over the vulnerability of human and natural ecosystems. Global warming refers to the increase in the average temperature of the Earth's near surface air and oceans that is associated with increased concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We also have the greenhouse effect, greenhouse gases, sea level rise, adaptation, adaptive capacity, anthropogenic causes, climate variability, disaster, disaster risk reduction, gender mainstreaming, and mitigation. We also have here mitigation potential and vulnerability. Creation of the Climate Change Commission. The Commission shall be an independent and autonomous body and shall have the same status as that of natural government agency. It shall be attached to the office of the President. The Commission shall be the sole policy-making body of the government. It shall be tasked to coordinate, monitor, and evaluate the programs and action plans of the government relating to climate change pursuant to the provisions of these acts. It shall be composed of the President, who shall serve as the chairperson, and 3 commissioners to be appointed by him. It shall also have an advisory board to be composed by the secretaries of the different department agencies, league presidents, and representatives from different sectors.
The Commission shall have the following powers and functions: synchronize all climate change programs, formulate strategic framework and ensure attainment of the program, recommend policies and key development investment in climate change sensitive sectors, create an enabling environment for risk sharing and multi-stakeholder participation. Strategize to mitigate greenhouse gases emission, represents the Philippines in the international climate change negotiations, assess the vulnerability of communities to climate change impacts and provide technical support. Coordinate with the LGUs and private entities to address climate change vulnerability impacts, oversee the dissemination of climate change programs and mitigation measures, other functions that may be necessary for implementation of the Climate Change Act. Framework, strategy, and program on climate change. This includes national policies, impact, vulnerability and adoption assessment, policy formulation, compliance with international commitments, research and development, advocacy and information dissemination. For national and local climate action plan, the assessment of national impact of climate change, including identification of vulnerable areas and ecosystem, the assessment of risk and potential mitigation of greenhouse gases. The LGUs are the frontline agencies in the implementation of climate change action plan.
Here, the role of government agencies. It is to ensure the effective implementation of the framework strategy and program on climate change. Concerned agencies shall perform the following functions. First, the Department of Education. It shall integrate climate change into the primary and secondary education curricula subjects. Next is the Department of Interior and Local Government. It shall facilitate the development and provision of a training program for LGUs in climate change. Next is the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources. It shall oversee the establishment and maintenance of a climate change information management system and network, including on climate change risks, activities, and investments, in collaboration with other concerned national government agencies, institutions, and LGUs. Next is the Department of Foreign Affairs. It shall review international agreements related to climate change and make the necessary recommendation for ratification and compliance by the government and matters pertaining thereto. Next is the Philippine Information Agency. It is to disseminate information on climate change, local vulnerabilities and risks, related laws and protocols, and adoption and mitigation measures. Funding allocation for climate change. All relevant government agencies and LGUs shall allocate from their annual appropriations adequate funds for the formulation, development, and implementation, including training, capacity building, and direct intervention of the respective climate change programs and plans. The Joint Congressional Oversight Committee, composed of 5 senators and 5 representatives, shall monitor the implementation of the Act. Lastly, the People's Survival Fund. This act was issued establishing a People's Survival Fund as a special fund in the National Treasury for the financing of adaptation programs and projects based on the national strategic frameworks.